What is going on, everybody? Happy Sunday. And today we are going to do some pre market prep for the upcoming week just to see what levels we're going to be watching, areas of confluence and influence, and what other fancy term you want to use. So, this is on the daily chart, and what a past couple weeks it's been, huh? I mean, this has been an absolutely insane move, and it's been very tricky to trade for about a week and a half, mainly because at all-time highs, no one likes messing around. And when I'm looking at like this range that was formed, this chop zone was absolutely brutal right here. And I mean, if we go into the 1 hour, like, dude, that is just brutal to trade. And that's where you lose accounts, that's where you lose money. And I know you can trade the turtle soup and have all your fancy little methods, but it's impossible to read. Even order flow would make no damn sense with this whole setup right here. But let's go back to the daily chart and look at some main levels that I think are going to be some areas of influence as we go into this week. And if you watch my video from earlier this past week, I said that this fair value gap right here was going to get rated because it was just monstrous. And it did. We came right back down to it and we bounced off this 20,400 level, which is going to be very interesting to see going forward how we play around this level. I personally think the 20,000 to 20,100 level is going to be the main area that we're going to want to focus on for this reason. Because if you look back historically through here, what do we got? We have what was resistance that turned into support. And I think we're likely going to bounce in this area again. I think if the market's ready to accept 20,000 and push itself up through the Trump administration, I think this is going to have to hold. So that remains to be seen, but this is absolutely one area that I'm watching just to see how we chop around within there going forward. Okay, so let's get into some lower time frames here. Mainly, let's avoid this chop zone. Let's focus on where we could potentially go next. So I like to look at the 4 hour, and I mean it's also interesting as this was that daily fair value gap that got rated. Look right in here. This was where the existing fair value gap was, and this got rated right. I mean, pretty much at the close of Friday. So interesting to see there. I think we will have to see some sort of a retracement, mainly because if we go back to the daily chart, we had two massive selling pressure days. And I want to see if we're going to have somewhat of a rebalancing back towards the middle end of this candle, coming back up to probably the 6, 7, 800 level. But for argument's sake, let's go back into the 4 hour. And then looking, and I'm pretty sure that would go back to where we were talking about, right about here. I mean, you do have some other imbalances down here. This is a very interesting level as well, mainly because we did have some chop in here. But with this serving as, I mean, you've got your swing low right down in here, but we also have another down here. When this really began the whole move up, right? Which again, around that 20,100 level that we've been speaking of. But you saw that in 2 days we retraced virtually all of this, and it could very well run back down into that. So let's go back to the 1 hour. And then mind you, everybody, this is on Trade-of-8. I like to chart on Trade-of-8 when doing these funded account challenges. Definitely we had somewhat of a double bottom right down in here before we had this move up. So I like this as a very strong low. But this is where the fun is going to begin. So this has already been rated. I mean, we're going to be looking right up in here, 20,006. I think you could see somewhat of a bounce down here. We could chop a little bit and become range bound. We do have the Santa Claus rush coming eventually, and you could see that start. I mean, we're coming into this is the week before Thanksgiving, so you could see that start sooner rather than later. just, I mean, this is why it's also key to look at things beyond just price action. Volume, order flow, that is ultimately where we're going to have to be. I mean, to really read this market, you have a lot of liquidity right here, just sellers hanging out. You don't know how passive these sellers are. And one thing from the Friday session, this this whole level, the 500 to 520 level, was defended so heavily by sellers because we had a pretty strong push up. And then this was just defended massively by a passive seller, in my opinion. So, do we see a push up just to push ourselves back down, just to come back into this 20,100 level, the lower 20,000s? That would make a lot of sense, and I think that is a relatively high possibility. Looking at the 30-minute, much more of the same. Just a lot of sellers that have just not been balanced in this general area. You had a lot of balanced price action to the downside, but once we had this push up and then the rip down, I think we have a lot more room to go to the downside, but it's going to come at the expense of this week probably coming up and then pushing back down. We will most certainly see, but this is why it's more important to be, proactive with your charting, but reactive to what happens on pricing. Because it's been a tough week to trade, and I don't think we're going to see that stop anytime soon. You know, you're going to have the typical push up and push down, but I think it's going to be very tricky to read that. And then hindsight, it'll be very easy to see, much like this. But look at this price action. It was just a choppy way on the ride down. So going into this, I think that's going to be more of the same. We'll see somewhat of a push up, and then we might chop between this zone here, this 400 level to 700, just a 300-point range, and before we probably run ourselves back down. Doesn't really make much sense to get back into the lower time frames here, but let's go back up to the 1 hour time frame. Let's throw the VWAP bands back on. You'll notice the bands on the bottom here are starting to curve to the upside, and you have VWAP hanging right around the 600 level on the hourly chart. So it's going to be an interesting couple weeks, that's for sure. VWAP band is not much of a help on the 4 hour chart. Just that selling pressure was so damn strong. And now we're kind of floating around here. So this is going to be very interesting to see in the week coming up, guys. But these are the levels that I'm watching. So by all means, put yours in the comments below with what you're watching. And I think it'll be a big help to have others see the same. See if I missed anything here. This was resistance. This whole zone right here was resistance and just got plowed through. So it'll probably become resistance again. It only acted as support barely once, and it just got ran through. Having this down here is interesting too. Just this whole little zone right here. That would just be a massive eraser though. I don't think this is relevant. You have all of this price action right in here. Very, very interesting to look at. Even just for argument's sake, looking at this. I mean, served as support, resistance, 1, 2, almost 3 times, then it acted as support, and we had our monstrous push up. So, like I said, I think this is the 20,000, 21,000, 20,000, 20,100 area is going to be the real point of contention to watch to see if we have any more room to the downside. And that's on the 4 hour chart, guys. So these are the areas that I'm watching that we'll be looking at to see how things kind of go moving forward. But Throw your levels down in the comments with what you guys are watching, and by all means, we'll definitely see you in the next video. Thanks.